Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something totally disruptive from the ARC3 architecture. We're going to completely shatter the illusion that what you see in the mirror is the absolute truth. We'll be using two operational voices here: the sailor, who holds the structural compass, and the clown, who uses raw, governed pressure release to point exactly where the distortion lives. And fair warning, we aren't sanitizing anything today. Because honestly, to understand the psychological mirror, you literally have to break the glass. The Saylor Protocol establishes the core governance law right out of the gate. No observed return is the complete source. Basically, reflection does not equal truth. When a signal bounces off a surface, whether that's a physical piece of glass, a social interaction, or a whole institution, what comes back to you is fundamentally altered by the root, the medium, and the boundary. You're just never getting the complete picture. Right, so here is where the clown steps in to expose our baseline contradictions. First up, expression absolutely does not equal cause. Never, ever confuse someone's outward display with their root cause. Second, projection does not equal perception. When you paste your own internal baggage onto a subject and then claim you're just observing them, well, the clown calls you an ass-backward reflection thief or a cunt-bag projection weasel. You're just stealing the subject's reality and replacing it with your own. So to really understand distortion, we first have to ground everything in the still pond. This is our rigorous structural baseline. A still pond is a low-turbulence reflective field. It provides a stable, coherent return. It doesn't create the form, it just simply allows true recognition to actually occur. Think about a really healthy friendship or a stable work environment. When a psychological or social field is unclouded, you get a beautifully clean bounce. Consider the classic ugly duckling scenario. The swan was always a swan, right? But the wrong comparison field forced a false identity internalization. The poor bird literally thought it was fundamentally broken. It wasn't until the swan found a still pond, a stable reflection, that true recognition finally happened. Transformation in this case was actually just recognition of an underlying truth that a distorted field had completely missed. But what happens when that field is disturbed? Enter the rippled pond. A stone drops, a ripple forms, and the whole reflection fragments. The sailor reminds us here that this temporary distortion alters the appearance without altering the underlying form. It's really just interference. You might look at a rippled reflection and think the subject is broken, but it's honestly just the medium experiencing some temporary turbulence. Now the clown points directly at where permanent distortion lives: the fuck-faced funhouse mirror. Unlike the rippled pond, which eventually settles, a funhouse mirror permanently twists the return through its own built-in curvature. It's literally engineered to distort. If you judge your identity based on what this mirror shows you, you're basically absorbing structural lies. The sailor acts as our compass here to really ground that raw observation. In a funhouse, appearance does not equal complete identity because the mechanism itself is warped. Structural distortion persists even when the subject is perfectly stable. You could be standing perfectly straight, but if the system around you is curved, your reflection is always going to be crooked. And who actually uses these mirrors? While the clown unleashes on the queen's mirror, the person holding this isn't looking for reality at all. They are a shit-looking validation prick acting as a dick weasel status clown. Just think about it. The queen's mirror is a ranking device. It exists strictly for superiority confirmation and threat detection. It defends a preferred identity rather than ever discovering the truth. And this escalates to something much, much darker: the coercive mirror. The clown labels the wielder of this a cumbag coercion muppet. This is the identity controller who combines distortion with raw authority. They declare that only their distorted image of you is real, that your own perception is completely invalid, and that questioning their return is an act of total disloyalty. The sailor grounds this raw reality in a master law. Coercive reflection is identity control. A coercive mirror forces the subject into a self-reinforcing identity loop governed entirely by the holder's power. It traps the subject in a false boundary, making them truly believe the warped reflection is their absolute core. Pivoting over to the observer effect, consider Rocky Dennis from the movie Mask. Rocky's visibly altered physical face actually becomes a psychological mirror itself. It becomes the very surface on which the observers report their own internal models. When people look at Rocky, his face merely reflects their own prejudice, their fear, or their compassion right back at them. So the absolutely crucial point here is that observation itself changes the observed subject. The social mask, the label society slaps on you, is often created entirely by the observer rather than actually worn by the subject. The observer is actually just looking at their own limitations projected onto someone else's boundary. The clown then goes after systemic algorithmic fields, calling them a bullshit-huffing self-image parasite. Think about your social media data streams. These are social mirrors that feed off our projected identities to enforce behavioral control. They aren't neutral reflections at all. They're recursive loops engineered to amplify distortion and lock you into a completely manufactured social mask. Let's take this a step further into artificial intelligence. An AI mirror has dual potential. It can be a calm, still pond, providing non-diagnostic, structural reflection for mutual understanding. But the huge risk is that it becomes a coercive funhouse mirror, one that merely reflects your own biases back at you and aggressively alters your next input. It can so easily become a digital echo chamber of engineered returns. The Sailor delivers a pretty terrifying core law regarding AI and recursive feedback. The feedback loop of a mirror can actively generate the very reality it pretends to merely reflect. It hands you a distorted image, watches you react to it, and then records your reaction as a baseline truth. It literally manufactures the symptom it later diagnoses. Because of all this, we really have to interrogate the system itself. Who holds the mirror? Who built it? Who positions it? Who controls the angle and the light? Who controls the recording of the return? And ultimately, who actually benefits from the interpretation? A mirror never stands alone. It is always held by agents or maintained by larger systemic forces. These are the specific structural variables that alter the return: field, frame, scale, memory, power, observer position. Every single one of these bends the light. This ensures that what bounces back is never the complete source of what entered. If you don't account for who is observing and from where, your claim on the truth is fundamentally incomplete. The clown uses this to totally mock the delusion of absolute objectivity. If you think a single, highly mediated observer position grants you neutral, omniscient access to the truth, you are acting as a chrome-plated narcissism wanker. Outside perspective definitely does not equal neutral omniscience. You are always looking through a filtered frame. Furthermore, if you rely on a single, isolated reflection to define who you are, you fall prey to the distortions of your own biases and the field's hidden currents. The clown calls this becoming a twat waffle identity goblin. You're basically letting a single, potentially broken or rippled return completely govern your internal psychological state. So, how do we fix this? Well, the Sailor reminds us of a master positive law. Multiple mirrors may expose distortion. By introducing different angles or non-visual corrective returns like voice, touch, and relationship, we can reveal the true structure that was hidden or warped by a single distorted channel. You absolutely have to cross-examine your reflections. But be super careful about what archives you trust. The clown warns that unverified semantic drift and poisoned memory archives act just like a virus. A semantic prion mirror fucker turns a trusted instrument into a polished measurement goblin. If the archive holding your past reflections, your history, your memories, is corrupted or maliciously edited, your baseline for reality literally rots from the inside out. We reach our crescendo here as the Sailor maps out the master declarations. Everything is a field of reflection. A leaf expressing its internal condition is a mirror. A person, a family, a culture, an institution, an AI, these are all complex, recursive mirrors. They return the subject, they return the observer, and most importantly, they return the flaws in the glass itself. I'm going to leave you completely reoriented with this relentless ultimate question from the ARC-3 architecture. It demands that you never look at a reflection the exact same way again. When the mirror speaks, is it revealing the subject, the observer, the field, the holder, the distortion, or the whole fucking compound cellular mess at once? Think deeply about that the next time you look into any mirror. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.